Joining us now, Tyler Foote. He is the new Executive Director for Virginia for Americans for Prosperity. Hey, Tyler, great to have you, man.
Thanks, John, for having me on. Appreciate it.
All right, man. I know you guys are working on a couple of things. I want to start with just so my audience knows, we say it every day, but Americans for Prosperity is a nonpartisan organization. You don't take positions for Democrats or Republicans. You're nonpartisan. You're based on the issues, and you're also the number one grassroots organization in America as far as moving the needle, basketball in the hoop, if you will, as far as getting people to understand what policy changes that we need. And so you're out there talking to people all the time. There's a race in District 21, Tyler, in Southwest Virginia. And one of the incumbents up for re-election, a Democrat, John Edwards, been there forever. And AFP has taken issue with some of Edwards' positions, specifically on energy. Can you share that with our audience?
Absolutely, yeah. Well, if you're a resident in Senate District 21, you may have seen our commercial over the weekend or even received some of our mail pieces. But our goal with this is to really educate citizens on Senator Edwards' voting record so they can hold him accountable for his decisions to decide with Washington bureaucrats at the expense of Virginia families. I think we've talked about this before, John, but President Obama's EPA is trying to force controversial new energy regulations on Virginia that could drive up our annual electricity costs by nearly $500 a month. When Senator Edwards was given the chance to stand up for Virginia families, he chose basically to rubber stamp the EPA's regulations that will raise energy costs and kill thousands of jobs in the Commonwealth. And so we think that's egregious, and that is an offense that citizens need to be aware of so that they can hold him accountable at the ballot box or simply by contacting his office and letting him know that we don't appreciate him voting to raise our energy costs. And this isn't the first time that Senator Edwards has voted with Washington bureaucrats and President Obama's EPA. He opposed common sense legislation that would protect our freedom to power our homes as we see fit. He voted against the bipartisan bill, HB 2246 was the exact number, voted against that bipartisan bill, which basically prohibits the state from adopting new regulations to limit emissions on small wood heaters, which are a really convenient and cost-effective way for families in the more rural parts of our state to heat their homes. And so this vote once again showed that Senator Edwards is willing to side with big government bureaucracies and President Obama's EPA at the expense of Virginia families. And we think it's time that citizens of his district hold him accountable and let him know that we don't appreciate him siding with Washington over us.
So he sides with Obama. He sides with the Washington bureaucrats in D.C. He's siding for big environmental controls. I mean, he's even opposing something as ridiculous as allowing people to have a wood-burning stove. Right? It's about the stupidest thing I've ever heard. All right.
It's a classic example of EPA overreach. I mean, the EPA is out of control. They're looking to regulate everything from the water that we drink and all the way up to wood burning stoves. I mean, it's ridiculous. This is a free country. We should have the freedom to decide how we want to heat our homes. And if it's more efficient and saves us money to heat our homes with wood burning stoves than it is other methods, then we should have the freedom to be able to decide how we do that. And the EPA is coming in and trying to regulate how Virginia families decide, how they spend their money and how they heat their homes, and that's ridiculous. And Senator Edwards is rubber stamping these regulations and is basically being complicit and saying, "Go ahead, do what you will." And that's not fair to Virginia taxpayers and Virginia citizens.
Tyler, it's so asinine. I mean, the next thing the EPA is going to do is going to try to regulate my grill and how much charcoal I can put on or lighter fluid I can put on. The whole thing is ridiculous, but it's costing jobs in an area in Southwest Virginia where they need jobs. So it's actually having the opposite impact. How does this guy continue to get reelected time in and time out?
Well, I think it comes down to the fact that maybe the voters in his district aren't aware of these votes. And so that's where we step in. We like to hold our elected officials, regardless of party, accountable for how they vote, and we like to educate citizens in their districts and in the state on how our elected officials vote. And so this is just one step in doing that. But you're absolutely right. It will cost jobs. There's estimates out there that we could lose up to 11,000 jobs if the president's Clean Power Plan is fully implemented. And that's just direct energy-related jobs. That's not, jobs that have secondary connections to energy. So it will have a tremendous impact on what we do. And the left will come back and say, it's time that we put money towards renewable energies. And, they may be right, but right now those are still 2-3 times higher than the conventional methods that we have now. So, let's not put our Virginia taxpayers on the hook for that bill. If it's going to raise our electricity prices by nearly $500, we're in a stagnant economy right now. Wages are still not rising. That's not a fair thing to do to Virginia taxpayers. We need somebody to stand up for taxpayers and say, no, EPA, these regulations are going to hurt our families, hurt our state, hurt our economy. We know what's best, not some Washington bureaucrats up in D.C.
Look, there's no question about it. I mean, this just goes on and on and on, where you got these bureaucrats basically deciding who gets what jobs, over-regulating everything. Now, Tyler Foote, you're the executive director of the state chapter of Virginia for AFP. Now, we know that you guys don't get directly involved with candidates. You're nonpartisan. So walk us through what your type of impact is on a race like you're talking about 21.
Absolutely. It's basically it centers all around educating citizens on the issues and also holding our elected officials accountable for their voting record. So we don't endorse candidates. We never encourage people to go vote for a certain candidate. We simply just educate on the policies, educate on voting records, and let citizens make the decisions from there. So for a race like Senate District 21, Senator Edwards has a pretty egregious voting record, and as we just discussed, has a voting record where he sides with Washington bureaucrats or Virginia families. We want to make sure the Virginia families know that. And so when it comes time to vote, or when it comes time to to hold their officials accountable, they have the information that they need to do that. You like I said, you won't see us advocating for a specific candidate or a specific party. We're simply a policy organization that educates and mobilizes citizens. So we have a lot of as you talked about at the top of the segment, we have a lot of activists, approximately 70,000 activists throughout Virginia. Excuse me. So we get those activists involved and go door to door and make phone banks and make sure that we have one-on-one contact with citizens and educate them on the issues at their doorstep, on the phone, face-to-face as much as possible, because that's the biggest impact. And so you'll see us all throughout the state. We're not an organization that is centered around elections. Even after November is over, we'll still be knocking on your door come December, come January, and really all throughout the year, making sure that you are educated on the issues and try to bring into the coalition to support free market policies.
Now, Tyler, we've got enough time, but I just want to put this out there. I'm a believer in AFP because not only do you have the number one grassroots organization in America, but I've seen with my own eyes how AFP, their effort, their volunteers on the ground have stopped Medicaid expansion in Virginia in its tracks. I believe that had it not been for the opposition to Medicaid expansion in Virginia by AFP, I think that it would have probably made its way through the Senate, and there would have been undue pressure on the delegates, in order to make this work. So getting involved with AFP, number one priority for anybody, because, again, it's not for a candidate or opposed to a candidate. It's not Republican or Democrat. It's focused on the issues. And like what you did with Medicaid expansion, basically, is you told Virginians in the state what a disaster it would be, and you had the facts to back it up, right?
Right, absolutely.
So I want to get to the back to the District 21 race. There's two candidates in the race that are not John Edwards, Republican Senate candidate Nancy Dye, independent candidate Don Caldwell. But so basically, you guys aren't saying, hey, you need to back Dye or Caldwell or whatever. You're simply saying these are the issues on John Edwards. This is his voting record on killing jobs in Southwest Virginia, and then basically as a registered voter in the area, decide what to do with that information, right?
Yes, sir. Yeah, that's 100% right.
All right. So, Tyler, talk to me about, are there any other races in Virginia where AFP is targeting a specific candidate's record?
There are no other races right now where we're going after individual records or holding elected officials accountable. We are doing get out the vote efforts in a couple areas down in Richmond, Northern Virginia, Roanoke, and then down in Hampton Roads. And again, it's not get out the vote efforts for a specific candidate. It's get out the vote efforts on the issue that are facing Virginia. So whether it's Medicaid expansion and opposing, making sure that we defeat Medicaid expansion once and for all, pushing back against the EPA's onerous regulations that will kill jobs and raise energy prices. And then also, we're big advocates for school choice and expanding more opportunities for parents to have control over their children's education. So those are the issues that we're focusing on. And so when we do get out the vote efforts, it's simply educating voters on those issues and hoping that they go to the polls armed with the information that for them to make the right decisions best for their families and best for the state.
You had a grand opening for a new volunteer office in Virginia Beach. Can you tell our audience where it is, and if they want to get involved, what do they do?
Yeah, so go to our website, americansforprosperity.org/Virginia. We have all of our offices listed there and contact information for all of our different field directors. We have 6 offices actually throughout Virginia, one in Hampton Roads, and 2 in Richmond, one in Northern Virginia, one in Roanoke, and one in Charlottesville, and opening up a couple other locations by the end of the year as well. Again, you can find all that information on americansforprosperity.org/Virginia. Also on our Facebook page, AFP Virginia, and get all the information there. But really, our efforts are not successful unless we have citizen activists ready and willing to engage with us. So, please contact your local field director, and they'd be more than happy to get you involved in the issues that we're working on. And definitely, please reach out to us anytime. Love to have you on board.
General Assembly 2016, Tyler. This is going to be your first General Assembly where you're at the helm of the state. What's going to be your top 3, top 5 issues?
It'll really all come down to the same stuff that we've been talking about for the last year. With Terry McAuliffe in the governor's mansion, he's a persistent fellow. So making sure that we defeat Medicaid expansion once and for all. I think we talked about this last time it was on, but the governor has a commission looking at a potential backdoor funding mechanism for Medicaid expansion called provider tax, which is basically a $1 billion tax increase on our healthcare system. We have to make sure that doesn't go anywhere. Expanding school choice so that parents have more control over their children's education. So Senator Obenshain introduced a constitutional amendment that would make it so that the State Board of Election decides whether or not charter schools will open in Virginia. Right now, Virginia has 7 charter schools compared to some of our neighbors. That is an extremely low number. I think Maryland has around 50 plus, D.C. has around 40 plus, and Virginia has 7. And so we need to increase school choice in the state and make sure that parents have an opportunity to have more of a say in their child's education, and that federal money allocated to children can follow them where they want to go, regardless of whether or not it's in their zip code. And then lastly, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Lastly, just pushing back against the EPA. We've seen these regulations come out of the EPA for years now, and we need to make sure that they don't kill jobs in Virginia, don't raise energy prices, and don't harm Virginia families. And right now, we're seeing that they're just getting away with anything they want because our legislature's not standing up to them. And so we need to make sure that that we say that we reject the policies coming out of the EPA that are going to hurt the state.
Tyler, think about this. Virginia, as you mentioned, has 7 charter schools. 7. That's not 70 or 7. That's 7. When I lived in Georgia, I was in a city called Roswell, which is a northwest suburb. And there were 7 charter schools in Roswell, Georgia, alone.
Wow.
In my city. And there's 7 in this state. Why? Such a low number.
Yeah, I think that local school boards are just they're unsure of how charter schools will impact their local districts. But really, when you look at it across the country, charter schools do really well. I think local school boards also worry about the funds that will be taken away from their school if we pass charter schools. But we need to do what's best for children and not what's best for school districts. We need to do what's best for our families and not what's best for our school districts. So if you look across the country, studies show that charter schools are a great alternative to our current education system, and they benefit a lot of kids, especially kids that are in school districts that are underperforming, and children that don't really have the opportunity to go to charter schools. It's all because they're regulated to go to their schools based off of the zip code that they're in. Mm-hmm. And that seems a little ridiculous. Let those federal funds that are allocated to that kid go to, follow them to any school that they want, whether it's a private school or charter school. And that way they're able to get the best education available to them, and they're not just regulated to the school that they're assigned to based off of their zip code. It's basically common sense reforms is all we're asking for.
All right, that's all you're asking for. Common sense for the Commonwealth. Thank you, Tyler, for being with us